Hey guys, I'm the 50s kid. This is an E46 behind me, and it's got a P0344 camshaft position sensor A circuit intermittent. And I can tell you that it is intermittent. Sometimes when I turn the car on, it's fine. Sometimes when I turn it on, it will basically, it'll almost sort of have no power. In the low rev range, and it doesn't really pick up until 4,000, 5,000 RPMs. It's sort of like the Vanos is not functioning, and the car's just kind of in a safe mode, which kind of makes sense to me because you need the camshaft position sensors in order for the Vanos to work. Sensor A is actually the intake sensor, so I'm believing that's the one that's faulty. I'm also getting, it's also stalling at random too, particularly when I'm backing up in reverse and then I switch to drive, and if I kind of get on it too fast, too hard, it'll stall. I'll have to sort of let it drift a little bit and get going, and then kind of gradually apply gas in order to get it not to stall when that's happening. So if you're having those symptoms and you haven't got the code yet, it's likely an intake camshaft position sensor or an exhaust camshaft position sensor. But in my case, it's the intake, so we're going to change that one. As you can see, I've removed the air box, the air scoop. I've also removed the fan and the fan shroud. You don't have to do that. The only reason I did that is because I wanted you to have a little bit more clarity, because basically the intake cam sensor is back behind right here, and this the Vanos solenoid is actually in its way. So we're going to unscrew the Vanos solenoid. We hopefully won't have to be able to remove anything else to get at this. The reason we remove the airbox is because the connector for that sensor is actually down there. It runs along the wire and it runs down to there. So let's take a look at that first. So that is the sensor connector right there, kind of behind the alternator. Just reach down and disconnect that, and that's it. Now, before we get any further into replacing the sensor, I want to go over how a camshaft position sensor actually works, because I think it's important to know. We are on the BMW, it's using a 3-wire Hall effect type sensor, and on a normal car with a normal Hall effect type sensor, you've got one of the wires is going to be your reference voltage, which is either going to be 12 volts or 5 volts, just depending on the system. One wire is going to be the signal wire, and another wire is going to be the ground. Normally what happens is when the sensor is not activated, the voltage is just normally going to ground. And when the camshaft turns around and comes close to the sensor, it actually interrupts the magnetic field inside here, and that actually switches the voltage from the ground to the signal wire. So, and what I just described would be a pull-up type sensor. It's going to pull up the voltage from ground to signal when it's activated. You'll also in some cases see a pull down type sensor, which is where when the position sensor is not activated, normally the voltage is actually going to the signal wire, and when it is activated, it gets pulled down to ground. There's a pull up and a pull down type sensor, just depends on the type of system. To further complicate things, BMW actually uses a slightly different system, which is where it still uses 3 wires, but for some reason, instead, it actually has a constant hot wire, which I'll just call power in this case, and that's 12 volts. And the signal wire has a constant 5 volts on it, except when it's activated, which is when that 5 volts actually goes to ground. So in either case, it doesn't matter how these sensors work, in either case, you're going to see when you look at this signal, it's going to be a square wave signal. It should be an even square wave signal though. Even square wave signal. The low is going to be 0 volts, the high in this case is going to be 5 volts. And that corresponds to when the tooth is actually activating the sensor and then when it's deactivating the sensor. So that's what the pattern is going to look like if you measured the signal wire. In all cases, what you would do is you would stick the negative lead on your multimeter on battery ground, then you would stick the positive lead to the 5 volt signal wire, or the signal wire, and this is what you would see if you had a digital storage oscilloscope, if you were able to visualize what the wave actually looks like. But because most, I realize we're all DIYers on this channel here, a digital storage oscilloscope is not going to be a tool that we're going to have. So If you just looked at this with your regular multimeter, you're not going to see this voltage switching because it's actually switching too fast. It's switching a number of times every second, and that's too fast for your ordinary multimeter to keep up with. Instead, your multimeter is going to show an average of these two signals. So you're likely going to read 2.5 volts on your multimeter as the car is running, because that's just an average of these two readings. So knowing that, why am I even telling you this, right? If you're not going to have the tool which is going to allow you to accurately diagnose a problem with this, why are we even learning this at all? Well, it's a good question, and I kind of debated whether or not to include this in the video, but ultimately, I think it's important to understand how these things work. You know, I mean, it's the reason that when I'm taking things apart, I tell you what things are. It's just so you can learn and understand what's going on with your car and how things work. But just because you can't take a look at this square wave signal doesn't mean that you can't confirm circuit integrity, make sure that you've got 12 volts on the power wire, 5 volts on the signal wire, and you've got a good ground. I'll show you how to do that. And if you actually have a P0340 code, which is just intake camshaft position sensor circuit, that means that there's a constant problem. In my particular case, I've got an intermittent code, which means that sometimes it's working and sometimes it's not. From that code, I can infer that the circuit wiring is probably okay. But if you have a P0340 code, you might have a problem with the wiring, and it's worth checking the wiring first before you just condemn the sensor and replace a very expensive sensor, especially if you have like a short circuit to ground or something like that, or a missing power feed. It's an important thing. It's really easy to just go ahead and check the integrity of the circuit before you go ahead and replace something. So let's go ahead and do that now. I'll show you how to do that. So I'm going to turn on my multimeter to voltage DC. I'm going to ground my multimeter right here, just anywhere on the body that's metal. I'm going to test my multimeter by connecting the red lead, touching the red lead to the battery positive terminal up over here on this side of the engine. And we've got battery voltage. So I'm going to use this is like a little alligator clip adapter for my multimeter, just so I can hold on to this T-pin here. This is just a T-pin, really valuable for doing electrical work, for back probing connectors and stuff. It's just bent at a little angle so I can get in there more easily. And as you can see, I've pulled back the I've pulled back the insulation on the connector, just so you can see which wire, and just so it'll be a little easier to back probe. So let's go ahead and connect the connector in. You can normally do this with the connector removed, but it's just easier for me. So I'm going to go ahead and back probe that red wire. Okay, so I got the key on, back probing the red wire, and we've got battery voltage, so that's the 12 volt wire. So I'm going to move over to the green wire. And now we've got 5 volts on that one. So that's our reference wire, or actually that's our signal wire, sorry. And obviously the black wire is the ground. So what you want to do here is switch your multimeter to ohms. So you're reading continuity, and we have continuity. We're reading some resistance on that wire, which means it's a good ground. If we were reading no resistance, that means it would be short-circuited to ground. And if we were reading OL, that would mean there's an open in the wire. So good ground. And that's it. So we verified the integrity of our circuit. Now, I believe you need a 32 millimeter wrench to get on this solenoid here and get it off, and I've just got an adjustable wrench. And you can see that I kind of don't have any room to kind of turn it because the oil line is just in the way. So I'm going to pull off that oil line. It's a 19 mil wrench. Let's go the right way. And let me see if I can just get this connector out of here and just down a little bit and rag underneath it for the oil that's gonna come dribbling out, however much. Okay, there's a little washer, a little crush washer on the top there. So make sure I don't lose that. There's another one beneath it, between the bolts. I think it's kind of sandwiched on the end of my bolt there. So let's put the crush washer on there and set that aside. Okay, now I should have enough room. Oh, it looks like the oil filter cap is in the way as well. So let's just remove that. We'll let that drain out. Okay, flip it upside down here. So now we should have room enough to get this thing off. Yep, that popped off. Of course, let's disconnect it. I gotta pull this little tube off. There's a connector behind it. You just press the metal thing, that connector comes off. Maybe I can get that by hand. Yes, I can. This one's gonna leak as well. I'm gonna get my rag right underneath it. Not sure how much it's gonna leak. Never done this before. Oh, not too much. Not too much. Rag is good. Looks like there's an O-ring on that. Make sure not to damage that. Okay. So it's a 5mm Allen socket, Allen wrench to get this sensor off. Looks like there's some blue Loctite on that bolt. Now we got our sensor right here. Just pop that out and we should be able to pull it on through because we disconnected it. There we go. So there's an O-ring on it. Your O-ring might get stuck inside there. In that case, just remove it with a screwdriver. I'm replacing it with a Miley. I think that's how you pronounce it. That's the part number. I wanted to use a good brand for this. Electronic parts. I don't like to use the cheap Chinese stuff when it comes to electronic stuff. Parts that have electronics. I try my best to use OEM if I can. In this particular case, the OEM sensor was like 120 bucks and this was 50. So that was just a little bit better. There is a difference. And I'm hoping that difference doesn't bite me in the butt. We'll see. So another way to actually test a sensor once you pull it out of the car, just reconnect it to the harness. I've got it reconnected now. I've got my jumper wire again on the middle signal wire, and I'm also connected to ground, same as I was before. Another way to test this, you can see we've got 5 volts on the signal wire. If you pass a wrench in front of the sensor, you can see that the voltage goes to almost 0. And then when you take the wrench away, you got 5 volts again. So that's a way to test whether your sensor is working or not. I think I'll lube up the O-ring with a little bit of oil. I don't think that was very much oil. There. A little bit of oil. Hopefully it goes in easier. Okay, that went in nice and easy. Very nice. Feels like this cord wants to go underneath that oil line. So that's where I'm going to put it. And I'll stick some more blue Loctite on this bolt. I believe I have some blue thread locker. Snug it up there. Now we can just put everything back in. Get our connector back on. Might be a little easier to mess with this connector if you take this top thing off, top cover off, but you don't have to, you can do it. Get our banjo bolt back on. Crush washer. Come on. Okay, I need bare fingers for this. Okay, there we go. Messy, messy. Don't leave oil on rubber. Oil will eat into rubber pretty fast. I'm going to rinse that off with some brake fluid before I'm done. Carb cleaner, brake fluid, it all works. All right, let's go ahead and get our connector plugged in. Got her snapped in. All right, now I'll just put everything back to put the airbox back in, fan and fan shroud back on, and we'll give it a test. All right, took a couple seconds there to fill up the Vanos system with oil again. Little bit of stumble, and then it ran smooth. So I think I'll call that a fix. I'm going to double check the codes. I'll erase the codes so that P0344 isn't in there anymore. So I'm using an app called OBD Fusion. I've got a Wi-Fi ELM 327 adapter. I'll show you what that looks like. This app was $5. Go to diagnostics. All right, clear codes. Doesn't like my left hand. Okay. Okay, all good. This is a great app. You know, it has logs. You can actually graph your short-term and long-term fuel trims on this app, which is, you know, really great. I recommend this app. For $5, you really can't beat it. This is a lot less expensive than the laptop-based app that you see me use all the time. It's which is ScanMaster ELM. I think I paid $80 for that because I bought it. So this is $5. This is a lot better, and I like this way better than Torque. I don't like that particular app. It's kind of difficult to use. Anyway, let me show you what the adapter looks like. It looks just like the USB-based adapter that I have. This one's Wi-Fi. They make a Bluetooth one as well. The Bluetooth would probably be a little easier to kind of use on the phone all the time because I always have to disconnect from my home Wi-Fi in order to connect to this thing. That's a little bit of a pain, but you know what? Wi-Fi works. Wi-Fi works really well. Bluetooth I find to be a little spotty. I don't know. I've had problems with a Bluetooth one of these that I bought. Bought this on eBay. It is a generic ELM 327. This is like a Chinese ripoff thing. It's not the true ELM chip. And sometimes when you buy these, they can give you problems. You know, when you're using it for like after half an hour, it'll just kind of start to malfunction on you, and you'll have to, I mean, with my other one, I have to let it cool down, and then I can just, you know, come back an hour later, plug it in, and it starts working. I don't know what's up with that. But this one so far seems to be pretty good. So you kind of take a chance with these, but they're really cheap. This was probably $8. So can't get better than that. So that's a pretty easy job, really doesn't get any easier than this. 12-inch adjustable wrench is the superstar tool for this particular job. If you're not a subscriber yet, please consider subscribing. I'm the 50s Kid. Thanks a lot for watching, guys.